Welcome back to Bill and Boz. Hashtag Bill and Boz if you want to get involved, as we have the great man himself. I was going to say the man behind Conor McGregor, which is true, but I think standing behind Conor is probably safer than standing in front of him. John Kavanagh.
Welcome,
Thanks for joining us, mate.
Thank you very much. Honoured to be here.
Firstly, you're doing a few things out here. There's a gym opening, I believe. You're on a speaking tour. Tell us what it's all about.
Yeah, so it's actually a year anniversary coming up of I wrote a book, and kind of took off. I thought it would sell about 10 copies to family and friends, but I think there's 45,000 copies sold now.
Wow.
And it's translated into Hungarian of all languages and Russian as well. Good. And then I got contacted by guys out here. There's a pretty big audience for MMA out here, growing audience.
Massive audience.
Yeah, and I run Straight Blast Gym in Ireland, and there's just recently an SPG Australia at the opening up in Sydney. So I've got some friends out here, like a lot of Irish people. We spread out, and so yeah, it's been since I've seen Crocodile Dundee. It's been since I was a kid. I wanted to come to Australia. So.
And Johnny, you're going to speak on Friday at Star City, the casino, and then in Melbourne as well next week. So what's that talk and that going to be about?
Yeah, so it's they're saying it's bringing the book alive. So talk a little bit about the book, some of the stories, expand on them. And then the part I'm most interested in is the Q&A. You know, let's hear what the crowd want to ask, what sort of questions, and a bit of interaction with them. And I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, I am too.
Yeah, just on that, obviously you're going to get a lot of questions about the Floyd-Mayweather fight. Your preparation, is it going to change much to what you do for an MMA fight? Do you have to keep training a bit more or harder or less?
Yeah, I said a quote, and it was kind of taken out of context, that it'd be simpler training for boxing. And what I mean by that is, boxing is one of the 10 skills you need for mixed martial arts. But now we're only doing boxing, so we can drop wrestling and jiu-jitsu and Thai boxing. Yeah. We can just focus on the boxing. So, of course, we're getting ready to fight arguably one of the best defensive boxers of all time, but the training will become simplified because we only have to do boxing. So, you know, it's a new challenge. I'm excited about it.
And John, on that actual fight, we know when it comes to boxing, MMA, like you told me before, it's quite straightforward. I want to fight you. We've been told to fight, but in boxing there are so many people. How close are we to actually saying 100% the fight is going to happen on a certain date?
You know, in my mind, it's on. You know, that's the mentality we're in. Like you said, there's a lot of fingers in the pie in this one. There's different promotions, different organisations, different commissions that are involved. But as far as I'm concerned, I really believe it's going to happen this year.
Good.
And that's the mindset I have. So let the people in the suits worry about the paperwork, and we're training for it.
Good.
I suppose you don't go into too much detail about how the training is, but how are you preparing for this? I mean, in terms of physicality, because obviously there are different stresses on the body with MMA than there is for boxing.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like the kind of physicality to get ready for like a rugby game compared to get ready for like a soccer game.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, it's not that it's easier, it's different. Yeah. Different energy systems involved. So, you know, we can cut out all the grappling training that we'd have to do.
Kicking and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like I said, it's simpler. It's not easier. It's simpler. There's less skills involved. But yeah, you know, we're training different for it than we have in the past.
What weight are we looking at, John, for the fight?
There's 147 being thrown around, which is about 67 kilos.
Yeah.
Conor's fought at 66 plenty of times, so that's not going to be an issue. But that's one of those points to be argued by the guys in the
suits.
Let's take a few steps back. How did you get into martial arts? Where did it all start?
Yeah, so when I was in college, I'm actually a mechanical engineer by trade, and when I was studying, I came across UFC 1, and I've been a fan, like most kids, I've been a fan of martial arts my whole life. You know, you watch Bruce Lee movies and. Yeah. But when I went to martial arts schools, it never looked like a real fight to me. It was always kind of choreographed. And then I saw UFC 1, and it was so raw. And back then, there was no weight classes. And there was a small guy, I'm a pretty small guy as well, and a small guy, and he was able to beat all the big guys. And that was very appealing to me. I was like, man, I learned this. I'm going to be whooping some big guys, you know?
It appeals to Jamie too, I think.
Well, we're in the same boat. So while I was studying, I was also studying mixed martial arts, and when I graduated, funny story, when I opened up my first school, an Aussie walked in, this is 16, 17 years ago, And back then, he was quite advanced compared to anybody in Ireland, and I was lucky. He trained me, taught me a lot. I'm actually over here now. He's opening up SPG Sydney. It's funny. It's all come full circle.
Yeah.
But that's how I got involved. I saw UFC 1, fell in love with it. I thought it was very raw, very pure, and I was hooked for life.
And the appeal of the sport has just taken off. Do you think that is the main reason, or do you think it's more the fact that people just got a little bit sick, with all the politics with boxing? The number one says he's not going to fight this one. He's going to. There's 5 or 6 belts for each weight division. Do you think it was a bit of all that, or
that definitely plays a part? But as well, I think fighting, like, say over here, okay, cricket is huge, but no one in Ireland cares about cricket, and then at home, like, soccer is huge over there, but everywhere in the world, when two people punch each other in the face, it's raw, it gets people's attention. And then the UFC, particularly the UFC as a league, they're a very slick marketing machine. So you put all that kind of razzmatazz, bells and whistles, with a sport that's so raw.
Stuff,
you put it together, and you can show that anywhere in the world, and people are going to be grabbed by it,
John, talk to us about your coaching techniques. What's something that you've brought to Conor McGregor's game, or even to another fighter's game, where you've thought, I can really help that person, but it might be a little bit unusual and maybe not accepting of the fighter?
Yeah, the way my coaching philosophy is, like, I'm very much about, it sounds very obvious, but I'm about evidence. I want to see what works, and then that's what I'll go with. So, for example, been talking about boxing, like, sometimes with Conor's techniques, a coach in a particular art you're doing it technically wrong, but it's working. And they would try to coach that out of them. And I don't see the point of that. I want to see, is it working? Does it repeatedly work? Okay, well then that's something we're going to focus on. So I've always tried to mold my style around my fighter rather than have my fighter mold his style around what I think he should be doing, Each fighter's unique, each fighter has their own strengths and weaknesses. So I try to spot what their strengths are and then guide them towards that, build their confidence and build their game around their own particular skill set.
That's interesting, because in sports like tennis and golf, in going back 10 years at least, a lot of coaches are doing just that now.
Yeah.
There's less of this, literally beating out of kids, something that might be a bit peculiar to them.
Yeah, right. That's same in our sport.
In football as well.
The same with the youngsters, But certain people have their certain styles, and if you coach it out of it, a lot of them get dispirited. Girls don't go and just say, what, this is not for me. Let them be what they are. That's the important thing.
You see coaches try and coach things out of all the time, tackling techniques, passing techniques, but completely different. And I think, like John said, the evidence is behind what the athlete's doing.
If it's not working, 100%. Okay, if it's not working, especially in your sport, if it's not working, it means you're getting hurt. So that's understandable. But if it's working, it does my head in when I see coaches doing that. When something's working, I want to change him to do this and do that, and you're thinking, why?
Why? So fast forward 12 months, say he has the fight, Conor has the fight, beats Floyd Mayweather. What's next? What more can he do?
Yeah, maybe try mountaineering and do Everest on one leg or something. Yeah, when he brought this challenge to me, I kind of had to just shake my head and smile. He's done so well in mixed martial arts, but that's been Conor, and also the kind of the mentality around, like, you can't do that. Like, we grew up hearing that. Like, you can't in Ireland get a fighter to the UFC level. You can't fight her for a UFC belt without having a wrestling background. Like, we just hear that all the time. But you know what? We keep doing it. We keep proving it wrong. So we're looking forward to the challenge of it.
And John, in terms of the actual gym that's going to open up here in Australia, I want to, because I've actually been doing mixed martial arts for the last 6 months, and not only have I found it incredibly difficult, but great for your fitness. Without having to, I want to get through to people. When you train, you don't have to go and get. I don't go and get smashed, but I'll just do it for my fitness and for your self-belief and confidence. If I was a young person watching this, what would it give to them in terms of, I think it gives everything, a little bit of everything, flexibility, mobility, for that you can actually do all sports. How would you describe it, for people who want to join the gym that you're going to open up here in Australia? Yeah,
well, it's open. SPG Sydney now is open. It's open a couple of months, maybe a year even. Okay. And, when people say to me, what should I look for when I go visit a school? That's what I'd say to do first. Go visit a couple of schools in your area. Obviously, SPG's the best, but go visit a few places. And when you walk in, the first thing you should see is smiling people. I think there's a misconception. People think, cage fighting, and it's all these brutes. But if you walk into my school, and I know SPG Sydney will be the same, it's going to be people smiling, happy, enjoying themselves, and that'd be the first thing I'd want to see is like an ego-free environment. Yes. I have a sign above my door: it's leave your shoes and your ego here. And so that's number one. And then, of course, competition, they've got to be doing well. There's no point being a nice guy and just getting whooped every time. So we've got to do well in competition as well. So I think with those two, those two factors, you're on the right path.
Yeah,
Is it true you had to give Conor a beating to pull him into line?
You know, it's funny that did happen. You know, we had a bit of a difference and we worked it out on the mats.
Last week?
But
Last week?
what I say is, like, back then he didn't know anything, so it was kind of easy. But now I need an army with me, so I'm glad he's a nice guy and that he's on my team now.
Well, something else we can share on this desk, I think, too, is what you wrote about him, among many other things in your book. He's the most self-critical fighter I've ever met. You said he wrote an essay on everything he'd done wrong in a 13-second fight, which is very interesting. And that sort of comment does keep coming up with great champions of any sport, doesn't it? This self-analysis, the ability to be honest with yourself.
Yeah, and that's something I push for my guys right from day one, is to be responsible for your own actions. You know, it's something I really impress on them, that there's nothing I dislike more. I can handle a loss, I can handle a setback, a failure, but what I hate is when it happens, people start blaming, pointing fingers, well, it was his fault, it was his fault. No, accept responsibility. Let's be accountable for our training and the lead-ups. But did we do everything we could have? Is there things we could improve on? And then when you do get a victory, it even means more, because you accept the responsibility for your failures and your losses as well. And that's something I talk about a lot in the book, that, okay, the book is, there's kind of some nice anecdotes up there about, you know, my rise, and then some of my fighters. Obviously, Conor plays a big part. But I kind of wanted to sneak in that philosophy that, you know, we're all going to have failures and losses, but what we don't want to do is have the fear of failure freezes into inaction. And sadly, you see that too much, that kids are afraid to put themselves forward, because if they fail, you know, their friends are going to point and laugh at them. And I really want to get my kids understanding that it's not a big deal to fail and lose. In fact, it's the secret of success.
Yeah, well, you learn more.
Right.
Yeah.
A couple of questions here from our viewers. Matthew Mangan, thank you for your question. Coach, how likely is another home fight in Dublin for McGregor, and is the stadium still on the wish list? You
know, unfortunately, it's very unlikely. They would have to change a number of things, like the walkout time would be 4 a.m. in order to hit the American pay-per-view market. Right. Unfortunately, in my country, the athletes will be taxed very, very highly, whereas the tax in Vegas is quite low. Right. So, for a number of reasons, I don't see an Ireland fight.
There we go.
And this one from John Snow. I'm not sure if it's your real name, John, given the popularity of Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones fan here, yep. How many more fights will Conor have in the UFC? It kind of ties in with what Jamie was saying about what next, assuming the fight with Mayweather goes ahead. But what about UFC?
You know, he's 28, which is young for the fight game, and especially the way he lives his life. You know, he's clean living, and he's just so into his sport. He's not going anywhere soon. You know, he could leave, he could retire now, and even with his excessive spending, he still will be okay for the rest of his life. Or he could do movies and make a lot more money without being hit in the face. But what motivates him is the same as it was 10 years ago. He loves the sport. He loves the thrill of competition. His body's in great shape, so we're not going anywhere soon, anytime soon.
That's an interesting point you made about the other offers. Now, Ronda Rousey obviously has had a lot of Hollywood experience. You know, overlapping what she's done in the octagon. But with Conor, has he shown an interest in that? And has he changed as a person much since you first had him? Is there a little bit of Hollywood in him these days, apart from the obvious pre-fight entertainment and all that stuff?
Yeah, you know, like Ronda, obviously she had one of her biggest losses in, I think it was at Melbourne, right? Yep. And she was kind of doing movie roles at the same time, whereas like Conor's turned down some big parts in movies in the lead up to a fight. In the Diaz rematch, I think Michael Bisping ended up taking a role that he was going to be doing. I think that goes to show you where his mind is. You know, he obviously could have made a hell of a lot of money there and had his training crew with him, but that wasn't his focus. And I know people always kind of look at me when I say he's not really into that side of things. He loves fighting, and then what comes with it, he does. But I've said it before, I think when fighting is done, Conor's going to disappear, because he's not one to... He could be on the front page of the papers every day if he so chose. If he just put out a tweet here, I'm going to be appearing here, the press will be there. It's not what he's into, you know, so I just think he'll disappear when he's done. And
the ability to be able to do that, to not need that other stuff, is fantastic. John, stay with us if you don't mind. We're going to take a break.
Magnificent.
Thank you, sir.
We'll come back and John will join in on a few other little things we're going to get through before the end of the show. Stay with us.